Hi, hello, how are you? It's me, I'm back, I'm here again, and I'm still an insane chook. In this video, we will be finishing the drawing from last time. This time, I am going to try something different with the script. I am going to make a bullet point list thingy containing various topics to talk about in this video. I don't know how it'll go, I don't know if I'll be coherent, but let's try it anyway. I love Khajiit lore and how creative and unique their lore is. We don't get many things that are as cool or crazy as a race that looks so wildly different from parent-child because the moon is at different phases. Well, moons, because they have two moons and they both change how they look. I think one moon basically decides if it's going to be big or small. I don't remember much, but there's a lot of moons. It's a shame that we can only get the one type of cat to play as. And another crazy thought is about, what if the mum's a tiny little Alfiq? Alfiqs are, for Khajiit, the one that looks like a house cat. Now imagine if an Alfiq gets with another cat, and then they have a baby. And then that baby, they give birth to a baby, one of the cat humans. Or worse, if they gave birth to one of the super big cat ones. God, I hope the birthing process is more like they give birth to something tiny, and then they grow into what they're supposed to be. But then again, they have like the whole thing where they seem to already know what they are. But maybe that's because like they have a very good midwives that can tell just because they know the phase of the moon already. I just hope they start out as like tiny things, or else the Khajiit is suffering. Though I also hear in the lore, all this, I think maybe they decided for the lore that all of the children will look more like the mothers because of that sort of problem. Because imagine if a human got married to a Khajiit and then they had a baby. If it followed the DNA of the dad, I would be traumatized as a woman. You mean I will give birth to a giant house cat? No, not a giant house cat. A giant saber-toothed cat that could grow up to the size of a horse or an elephant. That's a level I don't want. I would not want that at all. But on the subject of their birth, the birthing process, or genetics and stuff, I was very, very disappointed when exploring the whole of Ebon Ha Pact and found that there was a Nord and Dark Elf couple that had children. I was very disappointed that Elder Scrolls Online completely disregarded all of the pre-written lore and made her children all Nords. That is disappointing because you just completely discarded all of the things that was written before your whole game, and then went and yeah, we read that, we don't want it. We're gonna make all of her children into Nords. Straight up, white skin, pale faced. I think they were blonde, I can't remember. And no like other sort of discernible dark elf traits. Even though that there is a book in Skyrim called Racial Philology. I can't pronounce the last word. But it was a restoration improvement book that basically said that all children would take on the race of their mother. The fact that they disregarded it is upsetting. Like, Why did you do that? I'm also a huge fan of the Bosma, or Wood Elves. They're so different from other Wood Elves in media. Usually, the prime sort of thing about Wood Elves is that they have to love the forest, they have to be good with animals and stuff. And that's how it's always like it. The majority of the time, it's always they're peaceful and everything. And if you see the Japanese media of elves, yep, why are they all vegetarian? But then you have Elder Scrolls, and yes, they do love plants, they do love animals, but they love plants more, to the point that they're not allowed to hurt a single leaf on a tree. And all they can eat is meat. And even their drinks contain meat. I don't want to eat anything on their menu because I'm not a huge fan of bugs. I mean, sure, I like meat too. I'm not a huge fan of my vegetables or a fruit. But there's a limit to how much meat something has. That's too much meat. And I don't want to drink anything they offer. No, thank you. I'm quite a huge fan of tea. And you know what tea is made out of? Leaves. And you burn those leaves. I'm not ready to incur the wrath of the Bosma, because you know what they do to their enemies. I mean, after all, they have a whole horrifying ritual that they have to do before they go to war. But I will say that it's a reason why they don't go into war too much, because they don't want to do this ritual all the time. It's not fun. I don't want to talk about it because YouTube will bonk me on the head. But also, comprehending what they do is just horrifying. Let's just say, I think Namira would really love having dinner with a bunch of Bosma. That's all I can say. And another race, here's the thing, I love all of the races for Elder Scrolls. They're all crazy distinct and unique and everything. And Argonians are just part of that sort of weirdness. Aside from like some of the really cool things that you hear, I want to also completely ignore the fact that they have a bunch of reptiles that have female chest pieces. Why is that a thing? Reptiles don't produce milk at all. Even more weird is, even in their lore, they don't drink milk. They don't drink breast milk. They drink tree sap. They drink tree sap. What's the point of having boobs? I don't know. But the trees are the coolest things in the relationship, because the trees can think. The trees have thought. The trees can make absolutely horribly insane decisions. Like the tree in Cold Harbor that basically made a deal with Molak Ball, and now they're stuck there. Until we came in. And let's not forget what happened during Oblivion and how cool that was. The fact that all those trees banded together, they just made the little Argonians super powerful enough to run through the Deadlands and take out a bunch of Dremora. That is cool. That is very cool. That is also absolutely terrifying that they can do that. but cool. They're just weird trees. I don't know. And the fact that one of the trees is in Skyrim, but it's asleep. That's why we have called the Sleepingest. It's also super weird. I have a whole list of things I have to get through. I don't know if I'll reach the end to talk about talent, but yeah. And, okay. I never tried reading too much about, like, the other races in Tamriel, but they're all pretty cool. Redguards scare me. Their history scares me. Because I had heard that... Now this is insane. I've heard it, I haven't read it. I'm now too scared to even try to read it. But I heard that the Redguard left their original home because they created a horrific weapon of mass destruction that made their home unlivable. What do you mean by that? Huh? I also love that they don't mess with the dead at all. Like, they just... No dead, no necromancy, no talking to spirits either. No talking to, like, your ancestors' spirits. That's all no-go. No. That just... They have all these rituals and rites that prevent people from raising the dead, as well as, like, the social norm and what they teach their people. Don't do that. Just don't do that. And that's really fun. And then their sword singers sound cool. We never hear about them at all. Yeah. And then the orcs just make me sad. The person that like, the fact that they started out as a bunch of, like, the original elves, that then their leader was a great general, and then he left with all of his followers. And then he got eaten by this horrible Daedric prince. And then he got pooped out. Is he the same person? Or a completely different person? Could we call him his son? Or is it still the same guy? I don't know. The orcs don't know. In fact, they're kind of debating about which one is which. There's some that are really into the thought that he's a new guy, just born from the poop. And then there's some that are like, no, he's always been in this guy. He's always been this cool guy. And it's just... I'm still baffled on the poop part. I don't know why that's the part that has me stuck. And I do love the basically the god figure, and it's just god of the Daedric Prince of Outcasts, and that's the best sort of thing. Like, the best way of tugging my heartstrings, even if you're terrifying, and looking at you is scary, but you're pretty cool. So I'll give you that. And the Ultima, they may be pretty to look at, but personality-wise, they really, really stink. And after the Elder Scrolls Online released, like, the Somerset Isles, a lot of people, like, some things I read, a lot of people were very disappointed in that it didn't match any of the descriptions that were found around the game, because the descriptions describe Somerset as having buildings like crystals and all that stuff, almost like they're full magic, and people were very disappointed that it was not quite as magical as that. In fact, it just looked very ordinary, sort of. I mean, still very pretty, but there were plain stone mason buildings, things, and all that. So, sure, it's very pretty, it's very fantasy, it's very high fantasy, high elves. that don't fit anything from the Elder Scrolls lore. Their buildings remind me more of Lord of the Rings fantasy. And I'm fairly sure that the fantasy that the books are going through for the books that you find throughout the game, they're called high elves, but and everything, but they're more magical and stuff. I don't know why it went. I will admit, it's still very pretty. I love looking at it. It just... I guess maybe it might be hard. I don't know. So many people were disappointed that they weren't crystal magical buildings and stuff. But it's fine. Art is a collaborative project and I like it. Now, the Dunmer also have terrible personalities. I slightly like them, but sometimes talking to them just makes me angry. I will admit I'm not a very violent or vindictive person, but the Dunmers sometimes irk me so much that I sometimes turn off the innocent prevention button in Elder Scrolls Online. Don't worry, they're fine. The Dunmer come back. There's no permakill, no permanent death. They come back. They respawn after a couple of minutes. No permadeath here in Elder Scrolls Online. If you're a character with a story, a part of a quest, I'm sorry to say you're not quite as lucky. You're kind of the opposite of Skyrim NPCs, where in Skyrim it's the NPCs with stories that are more invincible or protected. The MP and the civilians are being more in danger. Elder Scrolls Online, it's kind of swapped. I mean, sure, the civilians are still in danger, but they come back. And the Nords, I'm gonna be a bit honest. The Nords are just kind of blandish. I mean, we spent a whole game with the Nords. They're still kind of blandish. They're sort of like what England thought, like medieval England thought Vikings were. Cool, but also, I would say that the coolest thing about the Nords might be the dragon culture. It's still kind of boring. I don't know. There's not really much to talk about the Nords. And we spent a whole game with them, and it's just a whole deal of there's not much that we can really talk about. And the Imperials just remind me of Romans. There's not much to say. I mean, at least they're trying to bring cultures together. But there's not much to say about them. I would also say that Bretons are kind of cool. They might be the smallest human race there are. They're so tiny. I'm sorry, but every single time I have to deal with Mercer Frey, he's just like... He's such a tiny man next to Brynjolf. I mean, sure, Brynjolf's a Nord, and Nords are huge. And the height discrepancy is between a very tall Nord, which is one of the tallest of the races, of the human races at the very least, and a Breton, the shortest of the human races. It's just an unfair comparison, and putting them next to each other is a hilarious sight. And I'm just staring at the Breton man going, "You are small, man. You are just small." I just can't handle the size of how tiny they are. And he's so small. I shouldn't laugh at Bretons. I shouldn't. I've been playing a lot of Bretons, but I can't stop being baffled at how small they are. I do like the Bretons. I do. I enjoy playing them, and their story is fascinating. I enjoy them as much as I enjoy Khajiits, I think. I think I enjoy Khajiits too much. Khajiits win, basically, for a lot of things. But yeah, I enjoy the Bretons. They're a very fascinating... They're a very fascinating race, really. Originally, I thought they were a very boring group of people. Having experienced it, reading more about their stories, there's something that is very... They remind me of one of those old-fashioned, or really old sort of choose-your-own-adventures picture books, where you basically play, go through the story as a young boy adventurer and stuff like that. And the whole culture is based off of questing and then gaining favors and all that stuff. Wow, you really are just this race of hero wannabes. I probably shouldn't have called them that. But I just love that because it's just so storybook, so fairy tale like. And then they have that connection with the Reach, and it really brings about a lot of conversations of the thoughts of two very distinct sort of things. The thought of nature versus man, but also the thought of old stories, the old world stories, trying to fight against modern grandiose tales of heroes and all that. It's just like a very interesting juxtaposition and stuff of seeing those two opposites fighting between each other. That is just genres of stories come to life that make a country fighting against each other to be the predominant one, to be remembered as the culture. And I feel like that's beautiful. That's fascinating. And everything. It's just very cool. Now that I finally finished that several half of the pointers that I wanted to talk about, I'm gonna drift off to another topic, which is about art style. But art style is something that is very fascinating and everything. But yeah, art style is something that's not just about... I don't know what my train of thought is when I wrote this. But art style isn't just about how something looks. A lot of people look at somebody's drawing and when you look at each artist's drawing, you see that there's a very distinctive style and stuff. And that is beautiful because, in a way, when you look at every single artist, it's like looking at their identity condensed into one picture. Not just looking at the picture as a whole, not even looking at the subject matter that really... what you're looking at that really tells you about a person is the way they color, the way they draw their lines, and how they form shapes onto the place, including the composition of the work itself. Of if somebody condenses everything into the center, it gives you a very different idea of somebody's personality compared to somebody who spreads everything around or keeps it all into a corner and stuff. It tells you about a person in very different ways. It's like a signature, basically. Which I guess AI is very upsetting because you're just taking somebody's personality and then making it into something that, into a rubber stamp that can just be copy and pasted everywhere, and you're basically removing the personality from it. And that's why I mean that's one of the reasons why I don't like looking at AI art, because they're just copying personalities that they don't understand, and all that. Looking at each person's personality and how it gets conveyed through their art is something that's incredible. Let me tell you. Let me give you an example. If somebody's art style is okay, I'll grab these examples of people I knew and their art styles from when I was in TAFE. There was a girl. Her art were like her style, her illustration style was very like vibrant, colorful, messy, strokes and lines here and there. It was very her style. When put in the line work of everybody's art, you would be able to pick her out from everybody else. And then when you met her in person, she was also very much like that. She was everywhere, and everything was everywhere. There was also paint stains everywhere, and she was constantly colorful. Even her clothing was colorful. It was just color, nothing but color. Everything was vibrant, lively, filled with so much passion. Incredible personality. It was very. She had something very freeing about her personality, and I think that translated into her work. And then you had further down the spectrum, was a guy that was very. It's actually very interesting about him, but he was definitely, his style was definitely more structured, composed, rigid, and everything, and things were definitely very planned, thought out, meticulous, mature basically. And his artwork basically conveyed all of that just through how clean, sharp the lines were, how there were more like geometric shapes in a lot of his art styles. How each of the people and their art styles really conveyed a person just by you could tell everything about an artist just looking at their art style. And if you're having a conversation with an artist without ever talking or meeting with them, just by looking at how they draw. The girl who was vibrant and freeing and everything, and then the guy that was structured, composed, and everything was so precise. Art is that sort of incredible medium that you can have that conversation to people with. And I find that very beautiful. And just AI art just doesn't really do that, because there is no personality. Art, illustration, drawing, it's not about the work you create. It's not about the subject matter. It's about the techniques, the skills, and the expression, the way an artist expresses themselves. I feel like that's one of the reasons why AI will never fully replace an artist, because you can't have that sort of personality when something doesn't have personality. Because it's just 0 times any number will still be 0. Now, onto a more personal and kind of serious thought tangent. This is a topic I have only slowly begun to unpack as I grew older and started understanding myself more. When I was younger, this had always been a rather sensitive thing to me, especially when I was in high school. To be honest, even to this day, I struggle with the label artist, because I have always felt that I don't deserve to call myself that. I had and always will be uncomfortable with others calling me talented, sometimes to the point where my soul winces as if I was attacked, because talent implies a skill I was never born with. Talented shouldn't be used to describe me. It should be used to describe my sister, brother, and that guy from high school who didn't put much effort and spent all of class talking and joking with his friend. Now that guy was talented. He had the most amazing skills with composition, strong foundation and with art and everything. Compared to him, I was a talentless hack that had only one thing going for me, and that was simply determination. I might have been born lacking in artistic sense, but I was surrounded by incredibly talented individuals. My sister was, and is, a fantastic artist with the most amazing ability ever. My mother is also incredibly talented in so many different arts and crafts. She's handy with woodworking tools and is an incredible seamstress. Now, my brother, my little brother, was someone whose talent must have been hand-picked, presented on velvet or silk, and gifted to him in person by some sort of god of art. He didn't need to put any effort when he drew a simple drawing of a hamburger and Coke. It was so accurate and had wonderful perspective and easily communicated what it was without effort, and all of it at the very young age of 3 to 4 years old. He very well could have been the 21st century Picasso if he was interested in it. But his interests led him to other avenues. He's still talented in those avenues. He just didn't choose art. And then there is me. I think I inherited many of my father's traits. My naturally loud speaking ability, as well as the inability to whisper, the ability to fall asleep very quickly and not be woken up by anything as well, being quite prominent features of me. The things that I inherited from my mother are her anxiety, the ability to procrastinate, and her delicate and kinda sparse eyebrows. Sadly, I don't have her lovely facial features to pull off such wonderful eyebrows. So they're kind of hidden behind my fringe to avoid anybody looking at them, because they're not that pretty on me. That's all to say I didn't inherit her talent. I inherited her ability to problem solve, as well as her anxiety and procrastination. I was not quite as fortunate as my siblings to inherit her artistic ability. I'm only 1.5 years older than my brother, but the moment he drew anything, I was reminded I was nowhere near his talent level. To be so young and to realize things most adults don't or choose to reject acknowledging is a really lonely feeling. Not to mention, you begin to question the sincerity of compliments. If someone can say to your face that the barely formed doodle with mismatched and misshapen eyes as you drew is just as good as the accurate-to-life fighter plane that your little brother made in the exact same time frame as your scribble, then it's no wonder you can't trust anything anyone says. After all, everything is said to be nice. So I kept practicing. I kept practicing until I saw what I liked. How long did it take for me to like what I saw when I drew? I haven't actually finished learning to like what I draw. I don't think I ever will. But that's my lesson to learn, not yours. Your lesson to learn is that just because you start out bad at drawing doesn't mean you can't get better as you keep drawing. As long as you never give up and keep practicing, you too might one day be called talented and feel insulted at a word that was meant to compliment you, but instead makes you feel that all your effort was invalidated with just a single word. I've run out of things to talk about, so let's just end the video. Now that that tangent is over, let's see how long did it take. 2 hours, 37 minutes, and 50 seconds.